approximate cost per, like when you add agents on? Does it work in multiples of 10 or is it per agent? Because I haven't ever asked that question.
Yep, it's
Anybody
per
know?
agent. If you want me to get you specific pricing, I can. But it goes in tiers. So, if you are a one user account, then it would be a certain price. If you were to add a second user, the third, fourth, fifth user may be tiered down. So that fourth, fifth
Okay.
user actually would start to be cheaper as you scale up and add additional users.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to today's office hours. Team building, building a team, I should say. I am dyslexic for those that don't know me. I'll read something totally backwards at times. So hope you will ignore my quirkiness at times. Yeah, building a team and what specifically will you do within Realvolve to make that process happen? So today we have with us Kendra. Kendra is amazing at helping identify the things that real estate agents need in their business for keeping them organized and stuff, and she'll go through that. But for those that don't know me, my name is Mark Stepp. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at Realvolve and have been around for 2 years, and just wanting to help everybody understand the why in what we do, making sure that they can be automated in their business and doing the things that it takes to do to have a sustainable business. So that's me. Kendra, tell us about yourself.
Yep. And my name is Kendra Rouse. I'm working our premium services department. So we just work one-on-one with you to get your systems and processes, built out and really implement a team or plan for the future. If you're a solo agent now and you intend on building that team, we're going to talk about some best practices and things that you can do to set yourself up for success today.
Awesome.
So again, yeah, we're going to talk about building a team, what that looks like, different things to take into consideration. We're going to talk about additional ways to get help and support, some more information on premium services. As always, I would direct you to our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/Realvolve. Any of our previous office hours, and we do this once a week at 11 o'clock Eastern on Wednesdays. Those recordings are there. They're also in our YouTube channel. And so check out Realvolve YouTube channel or Facebook group if you want access to those previous recordings. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today, I want to build a team. Where do I start? Sometimes it's, especially if you're a solo agent, oftentimes I see people kind of, sometimes put the cart before the horse. And so I think it's really important to have some planning in place. To make sure that you make the right steps at the right time. Talking about how do you add a new team member inside of Realvolve, assigning tasks to role versus a user, and I'll go into what that means and best practices. And how is the process different with additional team members? So we'll take a look at different, structures and way that you can set up your processes so that, like I said, whether you're a solo agent now and intend on building things out in the future, or you already have a team and you just want to be set up for success, we're going to go over some of those things. Setting your team members up for success. So not only, do they have access to the system, but do they have resources and the tools that they need? So looking at that. And then also for those that are on call today, we're going to give you access to some new team member training. So if now or in the future you bring people on, they'll have some additional tools and resources to kind of get ramped. All right, so let's go over to Realvolve and get started. So really, when I think about adding a team member, and I mentioned this earlier, I think planning is super important because a lot of people say, okay, well, I'm adding a new person or I want to add a person. What do? I go in and I give that person a seat inside Realvolve. That's fine. Technically, yes, you've added a team member, but you haven't done what I would consider the first step and built that person or, your ideal structure, your team structure into your processes. And so we really want to take a look at what that means. And so let's take a look at our contract to close process so we can see what we're talking about. So ideally, when we build out in the premium services department, when we're talking through things with you, we're talking about roles. And so when you're inside of an activity, by default, this activity is going to be assigned to you. So this RV team testing, this is the main account. When you create an activity, by default, it will say this task is assigned to you. As you can see, Lisa Test is the sub account or the additional user, in this case, my team. And so sometimes by default, people want to say, I'm going to do this task, so I'm going to assign it to me. Let's let Lisa do this task and assign it to her and kind of go through that. So I would actually encourage you to take that a step further and design your tasks around roles. Because the benefit of doing that is, let's say I don't have Lisa Test right now, I don't have a sub user. There is nothing stopping me from assigning roles, even though I do not have my team built out. And the benefit from this is that you can actually do a lot of planning in advance. Okay. So what would your ideal contract to close process look like? By default, we build it out with a buyer transaction coordinator being involved and a buyer's agent. But your team could look a lot different than that. And so as you see, when you use this drop down, you can have tasks assigned to brokers, assistants, client services, things like that. So it really gives you the ability to plan for the future. Now, the benefit in doing this when you're still a solo agent is because you can still run your processes. So let's say I have went in and I've said, in an ideal world, 75% of my tasks would be outsourced to a transaction coordinator, but I don't have a transaction coordinator now. I can still build my workflows with the intent of having those transaction coordinators do those functions, but I can still assign the role to myself. And so let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm inside of a transaction and I've started a workflow. One of the first things that it's going to ask you is who should be doing those roles. And so this is also part of the benefit of taking the time and assigning things to roles instead of people. Because for instance, if I would have said Lisa Test is the transaction coordinator and assigned all of those roles to Lisa Test, well, what happens in the future if Lisa Test quits or gets promoted to another position or anything like that? I would have to go into the back end of my workflow and change every single role or person that is assigned to that new individual. Whereas if I've built out my transaction process so that I have a buyer's agent and a transaction coordinator, I'm actually deciding in this moment when I start the workflow who I'm going to put in the role. The other benefit of that is maybe if you scale to a very large team, you may actually have multiple people that you could assign that. And I could actually use this drop down and say, okay, well, for this transaction, yes, Lisa is the transaction coordinator, but maybe next time it's going to be this other role. And so I really have the flexibility if I'm designing things with roles instead of users to really plan and, set myself up for when I scale. The other part of this is if I don't have a Lisa Test, I don't have an additional user, I can still assign all of these roles. I could have 6 different roles as part of my transaction to close process, and I could assign every one to myself as I'm building out my team so that I continue to do the things until I actually successfully put somebody in that role.
Yeah, this is something that is so critically important, and I see it weekly. I spend a lot of time on Clubhouse for those that do anything within social media, one of the social media venues being Clubhouse, and it's a talk forum. And I cannot tell you the number of times that I'm in a real estate group of some sort and I hear a statement very similar to, oh, I just hired an assistant and I don't know what I need her to do. Can you give me some ideas on what she should do? Well, you should already have that before you even hire that assistant. You should have all your systems laid out in some form or fashion. Now, you may want to go in there and say, well, I need that assistant to put all this stuff into Realvolve. That's great. That's good. I mean, that would be the thing to maybe have them do. But realize that by assigning your tasks to a role that can be assigned later like this, you don't have to worry as you grow, as you scale, as people change positions, as things happen in your business that we want it to continually grow, that you have to keep going in there and tweaking that workflow just for that purpose. And this will save you so much time just by doing the roles and not to specific people.
Yeah, exactly. And so really you want to step back and let's just say from day one, the very beginning, if you work in our navigator department, we're going to provide you with a suite of workflows and work with you to customize those and everything else. If you are not doing that or you don't have defined systems in place, what I would really suggest that you do is step back and take a really high level of overview in terms of, let's just say in specific, your transactional processes. On the sell side, we typically manage things with 4 workflows. You've got your listing appointment, your pre-MLS that picks up and handles everything from the time that you have the business until the time that property goes live on the market. You have an active MLS workflow that runs from the time it goes live until the time you go under contract, and then a contract for close for sellers. On the buy side, you can typically manage everything with a buyer workflow, an active buyer workflow that manages buyers that are committed to actually, they're out looking for houses, they're ready to go. And then you have a buyer contract to close. Okay. So at a minimum, in my opinion, those 6 things are the core of what you need to function your business. Okay. So if you don't go out and, define your own, you can copy what I just said. Okay. At a minimum, you should say, these are the things, these are the processes that will define my business. Once you've done that, then you need to define what's going to happen. And so let's take a look at this contract to close process. So right now we've got 57 steps. I did not need an admin to come in here and do this. And again, like I said, our premium service department provides you with these workflows, customizes them for you, talks you through them. If you're doing them on your own, you should know the things that you should ideally be doing. And so the system or the process is really taking all of those things that you're currently doing or you want to be doing or you should be doing and putting them in a systematic way in activities inside of a workflow so that workflow knows what to tell you what to do, when to do it, when you start it. So I go under contract with a buyer. 0 days after acceptance, I've got I've got a handful of activities that are important. Okay. Once I've defined these activities, I'm always going to send an email over to everyone, an attorney, title, who the lender, whoever needs a copy of that initial contract to get to work. I'm always going to be doing that. Okay. So I'm going to create an activity that does that. I'm going to define and outline in a template that makes things as automated and easy as possible for me. And then I'm going to ask myself, is this activity something that I can allow somebody else to do? And if it is, then you absolutely should not be doing it. If you're, the terms of your licensure, if that unlicensed person potentially licensed isn't breaking any rules by doing it, then take a really hard look at every single thing that you would want to be doing and ask yourself, can I offboard this to someone else? And in this case, this opening email to closing parties typically can be offboarded to someone else. And so, you're going to give them in this description, you have an additional, you can add additional things. This could be a script. This could be additional reference. This could be, things that they would just help them anytime that they're doing it. And then you can provide them with a checklist of things to do and actions. In this case, they're just going to send out a copy of the contract and provide everybody with initial details of that contract. So step 1, I'm going to outline every single one of my tasks. I'm going to go through and ask myself, can I have somebody else do this? And I'm going to assign that role. Anything you want to add to that, Mark?
No, well, yes. For those that's been around for a while, may have seen me use the example of, sit down in your office, wherever you're at. If you've got a big wall, think about all the things that you do through the entire process and put a little sticky note on there. And kind of when does that happen in that process? And then you can transfer all those pieces of sticky note type things, and you can do this digitally. You don't have to do it on a sticky note, but a lot of people have done it this way just to help organize their thoughts with their teams and stuff, and then take those and put them into these same positions. That's going to save you a lot of time. If there's anything that you do more than once, you should make a workflow for it. I mean, it's That's the whole purpose of Realvolve, is to help automate the things that you do. The things that you do, we don't always know. We can't create everything for you, but we give you the tools to be able to do that. And with the workflow process, the flexibility of it and what it can do for you, you can do virtually anything. It's just a matter of what do you want to do, and that creativity of how do you do your business that makes you unique in all that you do.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing that that I would suggest for any contract to close process is having a way or having an activity that verifies that you've set up whoever you're putting into place to do these things, that they're set up for success. And a couple of things that we do to ensure that this happens is by creating checklists that asks for information that we know are going to be inside of this contract. So here's the alternative. I see a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, come in and create this transaction," and and the admin's just standing there like, "Okay, well, what do I want to do next?" And instinctively, a lot of times what I see is they want to come to this transaction tab and they want to start filling things out here. And they're just picking and pulling and everything else. Sometimes they're like, "Well, I didn't see that." So they're coming in here and they're like, "Well, I used closing attorney, but my workflow was using buyer's closing attorney, and I didn't know that." You can save yourself a lot of grief by setting up your admins for success. And these checklists are imperative to doing that. So let's go back to our buyer contract to close process. When you go under contract, it is important that you pull out the important people and the dates. Okay. The dates are all going to have things trigger around them. We want to remind people of contingency period expirations. We want to ensure that certain things happen before dates expire. We want to make sure that the right person gets a copy of the contract. We want to make sure that we're communicating with the right people. Well, how do we ensure that we do that? We have to have those things in the system. So if you just tell your admin, go in there and create that contact and leave them to their own devices, I can almost put money on it that they will miss something or misunderstand something. So I think the better option is to create these tasks, enter the dates and enter the people. Your transactions will always have enter the dates and enter the people, in my opinion. And the benefit of doing this, right? One, we're telling them, hey, you have to ensure that they got a copy of the executed contract, which we'll talk about best practices on how you can get them started in Realvolve once you go under contract in a minute. But once they get a copy of that executed contract, ideally they should be reviewing it for completeness most of the time. And then I went a step further and I have put in brackets, because anything in a merge field here, when it's asking for it in a merge field, that essentially means that this information, when put into a checklist in this view, will come into this important dates and live here. So if I add acceptance date through this type of merge field, it will come and it will file itself where it needs to go. And so I can actually have a lot of control, because I can take these things that I'm asking the admin to put in and I can order them in the way that I want them, or ideally in the way that my contract lists them. So I know I need acceptance date, transaction type. I want to track, am I representing the buyer, the seller, or both? The sales price, the anticipated closing date, all of my contingency dates, the amount of my deposits, etc. If I put this in a checklist, my admin has to come in here and either input it and check it off once that they did it, or they have to double click it and say this is not applicable. So the other intention behind getting things off of your plate is accountability and the ability to track. So if you have this in a checklist and for whatever reason the sales price is missing, you can go into your completed activities and open that task up and see that the admin double clicked on it and said, "Oh, that sales price is not applicable." So you have a greater degree of verification of tasks and reduced amount of error when you ensure that everything is put into an activity in a way that you can, one, control the information and ensure that it's done.
And this is especially helpful for brand new assistants. They may not know Realvolve, they may not know real estate very well, and but they can follow a checklist. They can fill in a field of some calendar event. They can do that and get those things done for you so that you don't have to deal with them. The other thing is if your assistant, goes on vacation, goes away, whatever, somebody can fill in very quickly and know that things aren't getting missed because your system's in place, your checklists are in place, and all you're doing is following, like the McDonald's conveyor belt. I mean, every McDonald's you go to, they build their hamburgers a certain way. It's because they've got a checklist. This is the same thing, making sure that you've got that in place.
Exactly. And so by doing this, see all of these things on day one, I don't have the agent doing anything. I have the transaction coordinator responsible for, and we'll talk about who starts the workflow. But once the workflow is started, the transaction coordinator is being assigned the task to enter the people, enter the dates, verify that the documents have been received and that they get uploaded to wherever they live inside of Realvolve or your brokerage compliance software, wherever they're going. And then we're going to get an opening email out to the buyer and to closing parties saying, hey, we're under contract. Here's what you need to know right now. Here's your next steps. Here's a copy of your contract. All of those things can be successfully offboarded to your buyer transaction coordinator as long as you set them up for success. They can be provided with templates so that, things that probably would have taken you 15 minutes to write can be written in a matter of seconds, minutes, because we're reusing the information that we input in those initial checklists. Once this information is pulled out or put in, this acceptance date, the sales price, things like that, anything that lives inside of a transaction in Realvolve typically can be reused inside of a merge field inside of that opening email, like, hey, we're under contract with this acceptance date at this price. Here's all of our contingency dates, and let those merge fields write that template for you because we took the time or essentially assigned the transaction coordinator a task so that they input that information once and then reused it over and over again. Now, stepping back a little bit, we talked about step one, define what your workflows are going to be. Okay. So in that case, we've said 6 things. We typically have 2 contract to close, buyer contract to close and seller contract to close. One of the things that I think is critical before you even hire somebody is to think about what is the process going to be. Okay. Because oftentimes when people are running too fast, busy agents, they think that the best logical solution or what they end up doing is telling the agent, oh, here's a copy of the contract. Go in and put it into Realvolve, or doing these really time consuming processes that do not get things off of their plate. And essentially a lot of times would have made it easier for them to just do it themselves. And so once you've built out those things, okay, every time I go under contract, I'm starting buyer contract to close. I'm starting seller contract to close. One of those 2 things is happening. Now let's think about a higher level and step back in your overall internal processes. How is this workflow getting done? Are you as the agent committing to every time you go under contract, you're going to come inside of Realvolve, create your transaction and start your workflow? I hope not the best use of your time. Let's get the admin to do that. But how do you notify them to do that? You can email them a copy of your contract. Some people will fill out a form that, you can go super techie with it, fill out a form that automates the process. The information is sent to the transaction coordinator and a task is created and work inside of Realvolve for that person. There's a lot of things that you can do to really automate that, but you really want to think about, how am I notifying that admin, getting them a copy of that contract? They could just know by default, if you get a new contract, you always put a copy of that contract inside of your document preparation, your zip forms, your sky slope, your whatever. But you need to have a defined process on where's your document going to live? How are they going to get a copy of it? It's either probably email, you're going to upload it somewhere. What are you going to do? And how will they be notified to start that transaction and start this workflow? Because ideally they should say, hey, we have a new transaction. Go into Realvolve, start the transaction, start the workflow, and have every single activity be intuitive and already built out and defined by you so that it shows up at the right time, at the right place, and that admin doesn't have to do any guessing games on what they should be doing when. Anything on that, Mark?
You covered it well. Good job.
So, in my opinion, that's half of it, right? The planning, the processing, the building out of your workflows. Once you've done that, it's a matter of putting that person into place. Okay. So we have our workflow built out. We know that when we start our transaction processes, probably 75, 80% of these tasks are going to be assigned to this admin. They're going to be assigned to me until I have an admin. But now I've hired an admin. And so, again, I think it's important. You don't even need an admin to build out these processes. And I would actually encourage you not to let the admin build out the processes, even if you have somebody that knows your systems. I can't tell you how many times I've worked one-on-one with admins, and we've built out systems and processes, and then that admin leaves. And the team owner, the broker, they're like, I have no idea what this person has been doing for the last 8 months. I don't know how my workflows are built out. I don't know my systems. I don't know my processes. And they're left almost at square one because they did not orchestrate the higher level view that really gave them control of their business. And they put that in somebody else's hands. Not only that, but I want to know, that my systems and processes are set up the way that I intend them to run. So even if you do have somebody that, has been in place for a long time and they just instinctively know what to do, I would really encourage you as the broker owner to be very involved in your how do things work? How should they be working? Because if that role is ever replaced, ultimately it's up to you, ideally not to be doing it, but to know how to do it or what should be done.
I really like that term, orchestrate. I mean, growing up, I was in orchestra and played the sax and stuff, but I knew how to play my sax well, and I could do the things that I needed to do. But it was the director that told me when things had to get done. And not only that, he also knew how to play the sax. So as the exact same thing happens here, you've got to know what your processes are, know how you have customized them, know how you differentiate from every other agent out there. And then based off of that, help that player, that role, that team member do the job that they're intended there to do. And if that role is not there, you wear that hat. Until that time, you wear that hat. Brand new agents, they wear lots of hats. And as they grow, as they scale, they can start changing their hats and giving those hats to other people.
Exactly. And you kind of have to know how to do that. And it brings up another thing, right? About really being intentional on what you're giving other people to do. Because if you're not providing somebody else with the tools and resources to truly empower them to do that task, then you shouldn't be giving them that task. Okay. So I've worked with teams before, and let's just take the review process. So right now, 5 days before closing, we have a task that is going to ask the client, in this case, the buyer, for a review. A lot of times I see, the admin having this task, but then they're like, well, I have to reach out and see if the agent wants me to send this, because this may be a certain situation. And so the admin then is going to the agent and saying, hey, do you want to send this? Or, and there's this back and forth or this additional non-streamlined process about asking for a review when the whole review process could have been sent in 2 minutes. And so we, by default, have suggested or put that the buyer's agent is sending that review request because they, one, have the relationship with that person. They can make a very distinct decision quickly as to whether or not this person would be requested a review. Is it the appropriate time to be sending them a review? So if you're not going to tell your admin every single time, 5 days before closing, send the review, then those things that have that, that aren't crystal clear, then those are the things that we should leave to the agent so that they can do those. So once you've built out your systems and your processes, the next step inside of Realvolve is going to be getting that person a seat. And so if they do not have a seat inside of Realvolve, you can email sales@realvolve.com and inquire on getting them an additional seat. Once that seat is added, if you go into your settings in the top right and you scroll down to users and permissions, Then if you have additional seats, this button will be blue. If you do not, it will be gray. The blue button indicates that I can click here and I can invite a new user. You're going to input the first name and last name of the person and also their email address. Once you send that to them, they're going to get an email asking them to sign up so that they can choose their own username and password. Once they sign in or create their account, as you can see here, the account owner looks a little bit different than this user because I have some decisions and settings that I can make for that user. One, I can deactivate their account. I can lock them out. If I do this, they cannot log into Realvolve. So I'm going to ensure that their account is active. I also have the decision I can select make an admin. Do you notice when I select make an admin, this click here to configure security permissions goes away? What this is saying is give this person a very high level of access and make them an administrative user so that I don't have to come in here and be very granular about what they can and can't do. Now, if I don't want to do that and I have team members or admin that shouldn't be seeing everything or whatever, if I click on this click here to configure security settings, I can come in here and select and deselect things that they can do. Do I want them to have the ability to Google Sync, to import, to export, to merge duplicates? The team report, if I click on this dashboard, with that team report enabled, when they log in, they're going to see this team report widget. So this shows the volume of the account owner. It also shows the volume of each person that has a seat within this team. And so maybe I don't want my team to see other people's volume, or maybe I do, and I encourage a competitive environment. You can make that decision per team member and you can save your permissions. Excuse me. If I have tags selected, I'm giving that person permission to create tags, not use tags. Even without tags selected, they still have the ability to use the predetermined tags that you've selected. But with tag enabled, you've told them that they can come in and have the ability to create new tags as they need to. I would caution you on that because the system's capital sensitive. And so maybe you have newsletter with a capital N, newsletter with a lowercase n. You're going to end up with 2 tags and probably an additional need to do some tag management down the line. You can also come in and make a distinction. So what this says here, all sections, this person has the ability to create, update, and delete all of these sections for themselves. They can create contacts, properties, transactions, anything they created on their own, they could update, they could delete. Now, what we've said here is specifically with workflows, give them read access for all users. So if I, as the account owner, have created a database of workflows and templates, I then am allowing them to read my workflows and my templates.
That would also give them the ability to make copies of them as well.
Mm-hmm.
For their own purposes.
Yep, exactly. And again, maybe you just want them to have admin access and they can basically still use their account and then still, have a high level of access and you don't have to come in here and select these small things. Also, you'll see once you have an additional team member, when you click on your settings, you'll see this log in as. And so if you find yourself if you need to come in and go log in as, when you do this, I'm essentially viewing this as if I am this person. So I have the ability as the account owner to come back and forth and log into my different team members' accounts. Once you start having additional team members, you'll have additional filtering abilities. So for instance, I'm in my dashboard, I've clicked on all activities. Under my filters, I can come into this head icon and I can select or narrow down to see only my tasks. Or maybe I just want to see the sub-users' tasks. I can do the same thing if I click on this calendar at the top. I can select mine, which would quickly show tasks that are assigned to me. Or I can use this more and say, I only want to take a look at what Lisa's doing today and kind of drill down further on that and use some of those additional settings to see things specific to users once that person's added. Anything you wanted to add? Else you wanted to add on team members?
Um,
I have a question.
Yep.
So whenever you're given whoever the member is, either admin or let's just say they're another agent, and you give them read only, but they can copy it, are they not actually using the same templates that are created initially, or are they changing it? Do they have access to changing it?
some of the rights, there are some create, delete, update rights on the templates as well. But if you're giving them read, and I may have, I was thinking read and write. So they do have to have the write option for others in order to change your workflows.
Okay.
So you don't have that ability if they don't have rights for write or update for all other users. So you're safe there. It's more of a case of giving them the ability to say, well, there's a common workflow that all of us use, but we like to personalize it. You can read it, you can look at it, but you've got to, in order to make changes to it, you're going to have to make a copy of it and make a change to it. And then the same type of thing for the templates. They'll have to change those templates as well.
Okay.
Change
Perfect.
which templates they are.
And
All right.
that's one of the other benefits as well, especially if you're talking about adding on additional buyer's agents, things like that, is writing your workflows in a way where you can allow other people to do it. Because if I had came in here and I said, instead of buyer's agent, I had assigned this to me. If I gave this workflow view access to one of my new buyer's agent, and I had always assigned this task to me, if they go and launch that workflow, I'm going to have a bunch of their tasks assigned to me. And that's the last thing that I want. Whereas if I assign it to buyer's agent, when they go to launch that workflow, because they have access to view it and use it, they can assign themselves as buyer's agents. Also with the templates, you want to assign your things in a way that, let's see, let's take a look at one of these. In a way where you can use it, okay? So where anybody on your team can use it. And we can do that through the power of merge field. So let's take a look at an example. We have a workflow called New Lead Starter. We typically launch this on new leads that we capture from the internet or where we need a quick response. Somebody comes in on your website, they're looking for additional information, they sign up. We have a Zap in place that captures that lead from that website, throws it through Zapier into Realvolve, and it auto starts a workflow. One of the first things that happens automatically without anybody doing anything is that agent's going to get a text and say, hey, you have a new lead. Ideally, with that lead information in there, we can do that through merge fields. And then that lead would get an email and a text message, typically with information in it that says, hey, in this case, it's hey, this is, Joe agent with ABC Realty. Thanks so much for your information. Is this the best number to contact you, and signature? So do you see how current user and current user company? So I've set this text template up, one, to automate it, but two, so that it works for every single agent on my team. If I said, this is head agent, with 123 Realty, I couldn't allow my team members to use that, but because I've used current user merge fields, it is going to know who was assigned that task and assign it or autofill in that particular agent's information, that agent's company. You could even do contact source type so that it actually looks at this lead specific source and it pulls it in. So it's like, hey, I got your information off of 123mainstreet.com. And then also the signature would be specific to the person using it. So in addition to setting it up in roles, I would also really take a look at how you're setting up your templates so that they could be used by anybody in the future.
Absolutely. The only other thing I was going to say about what you had covered just right before this was whenever you're adding a user, by default, they don't have access to anybody's data except for their own, which whenever they first get added, they don't have any data. So whenever you add that user, and especially if it's an assistant that needs your information, your contacts, your listings, your transactions, you have to go into the security section and give them the rights to those records. Otherwise, they will not have access to it. Just for information's sake, it's not you're adding a user, now they have access to everything. That's not the case. You have to specifically allow them access.
Yeah. And to kind of recap, I really think that building a team comes down into two things. Planning. So plan your processes. Who's going to do what? How are they going to know to do it? Those are your two questions you should be asking yourself. Once you do that, the third step is just adding that person into Realvolve and giving them a seat and getting them started. If everything that we're talking about seems kind of overwhelming, there is a lot to do. So we do have our premium services department that can help you, provide you with pre-written templates and workflows to kind of set you up for success. If you have questions on that, just reach out to sales at realvolve.com. And you also do qualify for a discount for being on today's call. Coming up in some of our office hours, we're going to be talking about leveling up your contract to close process. So what are those? We talked about a few of the best practices today. We're going to go over some more of those. And, everybody should have a contract to close process. If you're doing any business at all, you need a contract to close process, buyer and seller. I don't see very many people having one contract to close process because typically you're communicating with a buyer versus a seller, and those processes are different enough where you need a buyer contract to close and a seller contract to close. So maybe put some thought into that and come prepared with your questions next week. Also setting yourself up for success. So whether you're a solo agent, a team leader, whatever it is, what are some of those best practices that you should be doing daily, weekly in the system, etc. And then also we're going to take a look at celebrating holidays in Realvolve and how to put some automation behind that, and get that process up and running for you. If you need additional help and support outside of the call, take a look at that black button or the black bar at the bottom when you're logged into Realvolve. You've got your how do I, your submit a support ticket if something in your system's not quite acting right, your help with searchable articles, and the contact us with the chat when chat is available. And I want to leave some time for some questions, whether it be on this topic or otherwise. We want to give you guys some time to go over anything that you want to talk about.
Good job, Kendra.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm good.
The other thing too, we have some pre-written courses, some go at your own pace things that we want to give away to anybody on the call today for those new team members. Those courses are going to go over kind of basics. How do you, get started? How does Realvolve work? How do you start a workflow? Those kind of basics. So I would definitely suggest, if you want access to those courses, go ahead and put your email, your Realvolve email inside of chat, and we'll have those emailed over to you. Definitely something that I would suggest having as part of your onboarding process for any new team members so that they understand how to use the system and then they can get ramped up quickly.
Absolutely.
Hey, Kendra, how long does that generally take? Because, it's taken me a while, I'll admit it. But whenever you sign someone on, how long are the courses for them to, since everything's already set up, I think it should be a lot easier, right?
Yeah, well, and you have access to a different set of courses because you're in the Navigator program.
Oh, okay.
But what I'm talking about specifically more of a drilled down, like, hey, this is what you need to know to get ramped more quickly. And they shouldn't take more than a few days.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We're making you a power user, Andrea, not an admin.
Oh, geez. I know. Trying. Thanks.
Sophia says, thank you. I am new with Realvolve, so definitely interested in basic tutorials.
Okay, sounds good. All right, yeah, we'll get those emailed over to you today. We'll leave everything open for a few more minutes in case anybody thinks of any questions. Anything else you had, Mark?
I do not. I mean, the the biggest thing that I think real estate agents are challenged with is understanding their own processes.
Mhm.
Too many times, real estate agents, it's like, oh, I know what to do, but it's all in their head. It's stuck up there, and things don't always get done the way it is in your head because you've thought of it, your assistants or other people that help you don't know it. Or if you do have it on a checklist, they don't always reference that checklist. And again, Realvolve is there to be that checklist, to be that process, to be that system that allows you to bring it all together, but you have to understand your own processes, like you said, and making sure that those processes are set up. One of the things that I have been intrigued with for the past several months has been using ChatGPT to help with those processes. If there's something that you would like to do to help in your business or whatever, hop on to ChatGPT and say, hey, I want to do this. How do I do it? What should I do? What are the processes? Whatever, and let it help create that content and information for you. There's a lot of creativity pieces, elements that some agents lack, and will they knowingly lack. They confess it. It's like, well, I don't know what to do. And those are the things that ChatGPT are great at because they've got reference to, trillions of bits of data out there, and being able to pull it all together and make something fresh and new for you specifically is there. And it's just a matter of taking that time to do it. So I know we've had a couple sessions on ChatGPT. I'm actually thinking about doing maybe a weekly ChatGPT and real estate process, and see if anybody's interested in doing that, because it's something that creativity wise everybody would benefit by using it. And yeah, there's some scary parts on there, Skynet and all the naysayers of what it is, but quite honestly, it's here to stay. It's not going away. And if you don't catch that wave, somebody else is, and they're going to be surfing and you're going to be drowning. So
For sure. Well, thank everybody for joining us. We'll be doing another one next week, same time. So we hope to see you there.
all right, everybody, have a great day. Bye.
See ya. Bye.